I think it's safe to get started.
Mhm.
So welcome to CCAPS IT Tech Talks, the return of our Tech Talks. It's something that um, we have done for years in series and one-offs and all sorts of things, probably since before I even came into the college. Does that sound right, Steve?
Yes, I think we were doing some.
Yeah.
We sort of started about 6, 7 years ago, and it was right around the time you came here
Oh,
that
okay.
we started them. But I do believe we did a few of them prior to you being here.
Okay. Well, so to more officially kick us off, I'm Dan Kunitz. I work in CCAPS IT as a business analyst and sometimes project manager. And I'll have Steve introduce himself.
And I'm Steve Mitchell. I've worked in IT for a long time. I'm a business analyst and kind of the IT logistics person. So
And then we have a few members from CCAPS IT joining us here on the call. And let's see if I can quick scroll through and just mention Annika is here as well. I see Heather Mathewson, who's here as well. I see Matt Sherwood. Hello. Mike Glazer. I think that's all the CCAPS IT members here.
yes.
But again, we form a team of folks who will be or have supported your IT needs, and we have some other Tech Talk topics coming up that will be presented by other folks. So at the end, I'll talk about what the next one is. So welcome for the return of the Tech Talk. All right, dive in. So our topic for today is organizing and sharing with Google Drive. This is one of our most requested topics for something like a Tech Talk. It's just been kind of waiting to be addressed. And as features change,
Mhm.
we continue to need to update our advice that we give. Um,
Yes, I think
so,
the last time we talked about this was actually called Team Drives. So they've changed
yep,
a lot of things in the 4 or 5 years.
yep. So that, and then also we are recording. Oh yeah, OES Roadshow. Thanks, Tony. That's what it was called. Well, that was even older, I think. Um,
Yes, that was a long time ago.
but I want to say that we are recording because we would like to make this available as a resource for folks who can't be here today, or if you want to refer back to what we talked about, because again, it is a very common topic that we've heard a request for. All right. So at a high level, University of Minnesota has several storage options. Why am I losing a bunch of participants all of a sudden? There we go. Okay. So at an overview, the university does support a lot of methods for file storage and collaboration. And so I want to start just at a high level discussing the things that we have available to us as staff instructors, in our role at the university. So at the top, I'm going to start with perhaps the things that are like closest to you. Your computer's actual hard drive, it's a place where files we know exist, especially if you're creating files that will eventually be shared. I know, that's the place people start. So welcome back for those of you whose Zoom restarted. That was cool.
Mhm.
For collaboration, your computer's hard drive is not that great. So storing things there is a little limited. But privacy is actually really good. And when it comes to data security and compliance, it's actually a pretty good place for things because every computer that comes out of OIT is encrypted. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve.
Nope, at least ones that are coming out today.
Yeah.
There may be some people at the tail end of the life cycle that don't have encrypted ones, but
Okay.
all of them are.
But basically, because they're encrypted, and if you're following data security policies, your actual computer is a safe place to store things. There are issues with getting at them if something were to happen to your device, but at least the device itself is actually a safe place to work on documents. Recovery and support, that's where it gets a little tricky. It's very
Pretty much
difficult.
non-existent.
It's very difficult to get data off of a
Yes, pretty
computer
much.
that,
Yeah, if a hard drive fails, it's pretty well gone.
Yeah. So we can't recommend storing things for any timeline on your personal or your issued device. If it's work related, we want you to use any other spot. So those options are the H drive, which is your home drive, or it's like the same technology that is behind the department files, but it's applied to just you. So you have the ability to control what's there. So it's a better place for your personal files because there's recovery and support options. The privacy is only slightly less. I think you're not supposed to put, I think it's social security numbers, some of the most private information about people. You're not supposed to be storing on the H or Z drive. So that's why it doesn't have 3 checks. But recovery and support is amazing because it's backed up all the time. OIT can help consult on getting things back if they've gone missing on both the H drive and the Z drive. So that's why these two have 3 checks plus. For collaboration, though, you definitely want to be using, if you're going to be using a network drive, you'll want to be using department files to store those things because you can at least open a file, close it, and then somebody else can open that file, close it, that sort of thing. That's better for documents. Oh, I accidentally scrolled. That's better for documents that you need to edit on a computer, like master files, original files, things like that, like in client-side programs like Office or Adobe products, things like that, where you need an original. Then we have Google Drive, which is it kind of does a bit of everything. So for collaboration, it's really great because you can control who all has access to something and work synchronously on the same document. So that really is, I don't know, 3 check plus. I don't know. It's a really good method for collaborating on things. Privacy is also pretty good. It's just not approved for private health data. So you can, student data, other things are good for that. But the recovery and support is a little bit less. 1 star, I'll say, or 1 check I gave for recovery and support for my drive, because if something's only in your my drive, nobody else can see that. OIT doesn't have greater ability to see that. We can't see it. If you lose it, it's up to you to find it and recover it. I give 2 stars because we have shared drives, which used to be called team drives, as Steve was talking about earlier. Because in that place, at least, if one person leaves the team or the membership of the shared drive, the documents still remain. And so you have more, you're less likely to lose access. And then box secure storage is our sort of the university's most secure method for collaborating on documents. It is cloud-based like Google Drive. I didn't mention this before. It's cloud-based like Google Drive. So it does, it's not, your information is not physically on a University of Minnesota device or network. But what that does is allow you greater collaboration. So Box has some similar functionality to Google Drive for collaboration, but its privacy and data security policy does allow it to comply with some of the more advanced private health information. So you'll see that one used for the most sensitive data when we need to collaborate. And then recovery and support is about the same as the Z drive, in that there's sort of a running version history that you can roll back. So I gave that 3 checks just because you at least have the ability to get stuff back. I didn't give it a plus because OIT doesn't necessarily have access to it. And then unsupported tools, this is just a broad thing. Like the university doesn't officially support, certain tools. And so collaboration depends. Privacy is usually going to only be 1 check or less because it's not been officially vetted. And the recovery and support really depends. So, Dropbox or, some of the other tools that we might use that aren't officially supported by the university, we'd have to take those, as on a case by case kind of basis. But hopefully one of the other tools will work for you. So let me just go back and check my notes here. So I will say that there are other file storage and sharing options at the university, but a lot of those are geared specifically toward researchers and who will work with folks to develop a plan for data security, retention, and all those other things using different technologies. So these are just the more common ones that regular folks like me might use, and less with the research side. Let's see here. Let's see if I missed anything. For the Z drive, it's it's also a better spot for privacy because individual teams, teams usually have access to just the folders that they need to on the department files, Z drive. So your team's stuff is in general not accessible to other teams.
Yes.
So that does help add some level of security there.
Yes. They might be able to see the actual folder that your things are saved in, but they won't be able to see anything in it.
Mm-hmm. And then one note about Box that does give it an edge over Google Drive that I'll just mention at this slide is there are some governments and organizations that block Google just wholesale. And so sometimes you have to use an alternative. So Box would be a good time to do that because you can still do some of that collaboration.
Yes.
With external partners that don't support Google.
Yes. And the other thing is one of those groups that we hear a lot from people is the state of Minnesota. Does not seem be very fond of Google. And it also Box may be a situation if you have people that don't have a Google account. Generally works a little better.
Yeah, if they have one. Great. So that was a lot of information. This slide, again, the recording is going to be available. But this slide is supposed to be a sort of an overview of, if you're thinking about something that really needs to be the most, data secure, you have the list of options. If it's something that you really just are looking for a collaboration tool because it's notes or whatever, you can see which ones will work best for that, etc. So today, though, we're going to dive into Google Drive because, again, that's the one we get the most questions about, its features and functionality. So I'm going to dive in to that. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll stop and take them as we can, or maybe have Steve help me with that. Here we go. So Google Drive. We have access to My Drive, shared drives, and then you'll also see shared with you. I'll get into that in a minute, but I've specifically called out the features of My Drive and shared drives because shared with you sort of shares those functionality with My Drive. So high level of Google Drive. There are two flavors, like I was saying. My Drive, the files are yours. Sharing, it's up to you. You are the default owner of everything you create there. Nobody else. And I will compare that to shared drives before I look at the demo. But on shared drives, the files are always owned by the team. Even if members come and go, the team will keep access to those files and folders and whatever. And the same goes for sharing. The sharing defaults to the team. So if you create a file, if you create a Google format document from within shared drives, the whole team maintains that access. So it's a lot easier to manage files that should be seen by everybody on the team. So some examples of My Drive use cases. Maybe you're just creating something for yourself, kind of something like you'd create in the H drive, something that's just, it's more personal in nature, but we'll say work related. And then another piece would be something you're working on, but haven't officially released to be seen by other people. And then also things that really just have one or two other people that you're kind of working on something with. Maybe you're just pairing up with somebody on something, but it's not the whole team that needs to see it. Whereas shared drive is better for projects or events or the team as a whole to share documents and collaborate. Things like templates or documentation, like training documentation, those are good for shared drives because as soon as someone joins your team, they join usually the Google group that's associated with the shared drive. And so they have access to what they need to from their first day, roughly. And then finally, the big benefit that I'm going to keep mentioning is that if teams change, like if someone leaves, you won't lose anything because everything is owned by the shared drive. And one last thing I'll mention is you can have a Google group that is the primary owner of the shared drive, and that way there's shared ownership of the ownership, if you will. So anybody who has access to that Google group can continue to manage the shared drive in perpetuity. Yeah, I think that's all I'll mention there. Okay. Let's dive into the demo. So one of the things that we've had come up in the past is sharing functionality. So I'm going to have Steve share his screen now, and we'll take a look at my drive and shared drive sharing.
Okay. And let's see. Okay, all seeing the screen now that you can, the first listing is like my drive folder demo and my drive doc demo. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing. So for this one, I just wanted to point out that when you say right click on a document or have a document open and click the share button, what the options are for folks. So why don't you click that share link there? Yep.
Yeah.
So this pop-up will arrive. It'll show you who currently has access. And if it's been created in My Drive, it's just you, which in this case is our CCAPS IT Google group manager account. So me, say, is this group, but normally it would just be me, your own individual account. If you want to add an individual, you can choose what level of access to give them from that dropdown Steve is showing. So editor is the default, which gives you rights to make changes, make comments. You can basically have full control over what's in the document. Commenter is basically view access with the ability to highlight things and add notes that don't actually impact the document flow itself. And then viewer is really what it says. You can see it, but not really make any suggestions or edits.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that's new is this add exception.
Expiration,
excuse me, because if you click on that, we can say we want this person to only have access to this for a limited time. So they can be an editor for a limited time. So or something like that. That's something that's fairly new. So
if your document has an expiration date, like I know we have to, push this draft message live on a certain date, you could have the access expire or something to other people. It's kind of a neat feature for, making sure things are secure.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can have access for the duration of blah, whatever the timeline might be. So then the same kind of sharing options in My Drive apply to folders. You can also separately share folders. And then any contents within the folder receive those same permissions. So you don't need to share you don't need to share every file individually.
Right. So
but it's the same concept.
We'll add Dan here.
Yep.
To the folder, and now you can see that he has access to it. If we go into the folder and there's a document in here, you can see he's now picked up that amount of access.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but within the folder, within a folder, you can actually give someone else access to just the document, but they won't have the whole folder. So for example, we'll add Matt here.
So we've added a Matt.
Yeah, we've added a Matt. I don't think that was Matt I intended to add, but okay. Anyway, but now if we go back up to the folder level and look, it's not there.
Yeah.
So if they would search for it, all they would see was that document. They wouldn't actually see the folder, but they would
And that's uh, it's a good way to design things because then you can organize files in different folder structures than perhaps the people who are sharing documents with you would have chosen.
Yeah.
So you can decide how it's important to you.
And you can remove them.
Yeah.
After a
So
certain
then,
point, you can remove
so then let's switch over to a shared drive and show those options because it's a little bit different.
them. Okay. Here we've created a shared drive here for the demo. And if we go to manage members, again, we'll only see the one in there, but if we add Dan, he can be any number of things. We can make him an actual manager. So he has total control over everything here. He can delete other managers. A content manager can add, delete item, can do everything except delete managers. Basically, they can actually originally a content manager could not add access, but now content managers can. So you could give an individual access to something. And then again, contributor is just somebody who can add or edit files, but they can't delete anything or they can't change any access to things. Commenter, just like with a document, they can go into a document and make a comment about it that the owners would see, but they wouldn't be able to actually make any changes to the document. And then again, viewer, simply they could see it.
So by default, you're added as a content manager because it assumes that you're adding like members to the team, people who are full
Yes.
members to that folder. And then they will receive permissions to everything inside of that shared drive.
Yes.
Where, and that's one of the similarities with my drive is that, that cascade of ownership. The thing that's unique about shared drives is you can't remove access to specific things inside of a shared drive. So once you have identified your team as members of the shared drive, they have access to everything in the shared drive and ownership sort of accordingly, to this.
Yes.
But you can add people to specific files and folders, kind
Yes.
of like my drive.
Yes, just as you would with my drive.
Yep. So that's the main thing to demonstrate there. Let's go back to the slides, Steve.
Okay.
So I'll take over sharing.
You may do that.
And go back to this. Okay. So for how we suggest actually using, so organizing and finding things in Google Drive. So for my drive, we suggest, well, it's up to you. You can choose to build a whole folder hierarchy or not. It's up to you because if you primarily find things by browsing, maybe that's an attractive idea, is to have everything organized like in folders. If you are totally comfortable searching for things, cool. That's actually how I end up using Google Drive, especially my drive. Then you don't really need folders unless there's some organization that you add. So I guess I should say I use both folders and just search. And additionally, there are tools to help you find things even if you're not using folders, like your browser bookmarks. You can make a bookmark to a particular folder. Like I'll have one for the projects I'm working on that take me straight to that folder. Shortcuts are something you can build within Google Drive. You can add a shortcut to a document that doesn't necessarily live in a folder that you've chosen. You can say, I want to make a shortcut in this folder to a document that I don't have access to move. And you can also, star a document or add colors to folders. Again, these are things that are available. You don't have to use them, but if it makes you comfortable to see files in a more of a folder structure with colors and things that are more like it used to be, on a computer, those are things that they've tried to implement. Over on the shared drive side, I would recommend creating a folder hierarchy because that's what people expect in a sort of an official collection of documents. That way it's organized in a fashion that if somebody joins it after it's been created, there's a little more context to why things are where they are. Additionally, if you have a process or some other sequence that you've created folders for, I'd suggest making their name include a number so that you know the order, because sometimes Google Drive will sort by relevance or last modified.
Mhm.
And if you have numbers, you can sort by name and quickly see the order that it's supposed to be. I'd also suggest naming folders using a shared terminology. So if you're all using a certain word to describe something, use that in the folder name as well. It just makes life easier for everyone. And then finally, with shared drives, I think using Google format documents is best if possible. So
Yes.
just because it's easier to search within and make edits and collaborate that way. However, I know that things can't all be in a Google format. So you can definitely still upload them. Just know that for some of those things, they're easier downloaded rather than viewed inside of Google Drive. It's kind of the tip with that one.
Mhm. One thing it occurred to me, in the past, when you were using shared drives, there was a point early on when you couldn't actually copy a whole folder into a shared drive, and that has changed. That does not. It just like with a document, it overwrites all the permissions, so that that folder would then acquire the permissions of the shared drive folder. But that is possible to do now, and a pretty simple drag and drop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that also is a useful tool if you want to add a whole bunch of documents at once. So like you put together your organization scheme and then move the whole block in at once.
Yes.
All right. So let's just wrap up organizing and finding things in Google, and then maybe pause for a question here. But at this point, for people who do want to use search, or at least want to learn more about search as a means of finding things within Google, I wanted to just take a look at what that looks like. So let's switch back to Steve,
Okay.
and we'll do an example search and some of the functionality that is within Google Drive search.
Where'd I go? I lost myself here.
While you're looking that up, I'll answer this question that Linda had. So, so when you're using My Drive, you can share a folder with an individual, and then that individual will gain access to all of the documents within that folder. Were you talking about in My Drive? Like that would be the way that I would recommend transferring a folder to somebody else.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, and then everyone that was in that shared folder would then lose the access they had once it's transferred?
Oh, so you're saying transferring something out of a shared drive or out of a folder that had other people shared on the sharing list?
Shared folder.
Okay. Yeah, so so you can take things out of shared drive if you have enough permissions to do so. You'd have to be logged in as the sort of manager account to actually move something out, which usually means the account that created the shared drive. But then you can move that out and sort of turn it into a My Drive, folder, and then manage access separately. The other option would be to keep the shared drive folder with too much access and just move the content out of it. And change the sharing settings on the whole shared drive to be less. And then within each specific folder, add people back. That's another option you have. So think of the shared drives sharing functionality as the least common denominator, and then you can add to it in subfolders if you wish.
It's not a shared drive, it's just a shared folder.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right, Steve.
Okay.
We got your shared.
I finally get my screen up.
Not yet. I still see you. So
Still see me. Okay. Well, I'm trying to.
There it goes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is again back in Google Drive. You can search for, I don't know, yes.
Search for test.
So you'll get documents, not just documents that you've created, but documents that you can see in either My Drive or a shared drive. So you don't have to know if it's in a shared drive or not. You can just search for it. But then you can specify with filters along the top different locations. So from location, you can choose My Drive to specify just the things that I have access to.
Yeah.
And then also choose file type. So if you're thinking, I know it's a spreadsheet, but I can't remember what it's called, like you can sort just by seeing the document type.
Yeah.
It also works with like PDF or other document types.
Yeah, there's PDFs, videos, audio, even drawings.
So that's just briefly kind of how the search works, but you'll notice that when you choose a filter, you'll see it in the top inside of the search box, type : spreadsheet. This is something that I've made heavy use of since I primarily, like I said before, since I primarily search for documents. I've gotten to know words like type, the key terms. So type : and then I'll type, spreadsheet or doc or whatever. And then I forget what the other ones are that I've used a lot. But over time, if you end up using some of these filters, it rolls off your,
If you use last modified, that'll get you things that say if you've been working on something recently and you just lost track of it, you can click on things in the last 7 days and it'll give you things that showed up that were
edited recently.
So
yeah. Yep. So there are different ways to slice and dice the search results. We'll put it that way. One other thing I wanted to have you demonstrate, Steve, is if you're in a shared drive, I want to show how to search just within that shared drive. So click on our CCAPS test folder, for instance. This is an important functionality because it's younger. It's a newer feature. But you can just click on the CCAP shared drives demo title that you're hovering on. Yep, left click there. Within here, you can see below rename, it says search within CCAP shared drives demo. You can click that and then continue to do searches this way. Or you can type in the word and then choose that as an option to limit just to this particular shared drive, which is useful again if you've got things organized by into multiple shared drives. Like in my case, we have projects. So like I know this is related to my work with PSEO. So I can say, just show me the things that are inside of the PSEO project shared drive. And then you still have access to file types and other sort options.
yes. Okay.
So from here, I have some more generic tips and tricks. So we'll share that. And again, add any questions you might have to the chat and I'll address them as we can. Otherwise, we can have a questions time at the end. But so tips that are specific to My Drive and Shared Drive. My Drive, again, if you have an employee or a student worker, whatever role they play on a team, if you have them creating documents, it's best to have them create them in a place that can be accessed even if they stop working for us or we need to get at them for some reason. So what I recommend is if before someone does leave, they should either move the documents that they have been working on within your team to a shared drive, or as sort of a last ditch thing, at least assign each file and folder or give ownership to a departmental account that you have. That way the files aren't kind of stuck in limbo. Because OIT can't really help us get at files that remain owned by past employees.
Yes. We have a good example ourselves is about 5 years ago when this was all sort of new. Laura Martin, for those of you who remember her, left, and she owned a lot of our on and offboarding documents. And there's nothing we could do to change that ownership. That's the only thing we have. We can view it and we can edit it and everything, but we can never. The only thing you can do is make a copy of it, and everybody just has to remember to use the new copy,
the newer copy. Yeah.
the newer
So,
copy.
so I will say there's still a way around it. If you have at least view access, you can make a copy and then control it. But it's best, again, if before someone leaves, you can work with them to get those files into an easier place to share them, like a shared drive, which I would say is great for, or I mean, sorry, which I would add tips for that is if you share it with our Google Group account that we were using to demonstrate earlier in this discussion, CCAPS ITGG. That is the account that we use to help people support Google Groups, but also shared drives. So if you're thinking you might need help with something, you can add that account as a manager, especially if you've already emailed us for a question, and you can grant that access so we can actually look in there to help you. Again, this gets it to part of why it's hard for OIT to help is because they have to actually be added to everything, and they don't have the capacity for that.
Yes.
Shared drives are, it's best to start the name with CCAPS because folks, and you know, you may have noticed this in your own shared drives, but you'll end up seeing a long list of folders there. And for all of your CCAPS related things, it's nice to have them in one group. And then for things that might be, you know, interdepartmental or other, you know, non-CCAPS specific things, then those can be organized a little bit separately. And then finally, the tip I have with shared drives is to frequently or regularly at least review who the members are on that shared drive. It might be people who have since left, and it's best to remove them, especially if they have moved somewhere else at the university where they really don't need access to CCAP stuff anymore, but still have access to their account. And then also files too. So it really doesn't do us any good to keep files forever. If something is done, and this gets at sort of the privacy security side of that hat that I wear. If you've got a document that's been there living forever and you don't remember what's in it, or it's no longer relevant to some ongoing work, it's actually safer to get rid of it because it's how do I put this? We don't need to keep everything forever because it's an unsustainable model, not so much because it takes space, which it does, but that's not the issue. It's more that we don't want to hang on to documents that are incorrect, outdated, unspecific, things that might confuse people if they do happen upon them by searching for things. So I'll just say, get rid of things as you can.
Yes.
And if you want to archive them, Google Drive is a great collaboration space, but for long-term archiving, it's actually better to move that to somewhere like the Z Drive, for instance. So there are ways to export things out of Google Drive that we're not going to cover here today, but that would be something that I'd recommend doing for longer term storage, just because we have ownership of the Z Drive as a university.
And just as a general rule, space is becoming more precious no matter what. So, yeah,
there's no specific policy or any decision that's been made that requires us to save space. It's just that in general, we know that storing things in the cloud is expensive.
Yes.
And so, if anything ever does come down,
sooner or later they'll start passing those costs on to us. So let's just try to be good stewards of the university's money. We have a question that
yes, thank you,
came from Carmi. Can you copy the folder structure and create a new folder, but not copy the items in the folder? So did I get that correct, Carmi?
No, I was saying, can you copy like say we have a programming 22, within that we have, 10 folders. We want programming 2022 to be copied for 23, 24, and 25. I see that you can move it. but I don't see an option to take that and copy it with all the folders within it.
Is that a shared drive? Or
Yeah.
is it okay? Um, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer. Steve, do you know?
My gut reaction would be no. I don't think you can. At least not what I'm seeing right off the bat. Just kind of glancing here, I'm not seeing an option to basically copy a folder or the folder structure.
Okay.
We may have to get back to you
Yeah,
on that.
Yeah, we can
just to
take a-
double check.
We can take a look and see if we can find something about that and get back to you on it. But at least I'm not aware of anything that you could do that
Yeah.
with.
And you know what I mean, you know,
Yes.
because we have 4 terms
you
and
wanna-
many.
You just want
Yeah.
you want to have the folder structure there so you can start putting the documents in year by year and the things you're working
Yeah,
on. That
exactly. Thanks.
makes sense, but
Yeah, and Blaine says you might be able to create a folder structure to be copied, but that maybe it's the fact that there are files there that's keeping you from creating a copy. Like if you just had
Oh,
one that's only folders,
yeah, just
maybe
do
that
it
would-
like a template and have
Yeah.
nothing in the folders.
that's a good
Good. I
point,
can
Blaine.
try
That's
that.
a good
Thanks,
point.
Blaine.
And yeah, I
Yeah.
see one more question here.
yes, Susan had a question about guidelines for when to use Google Drive and when to use Z Drive.
Yeah, so I will let's wrap up this last tips about Google Drive, and then I think I'll answer that by going back up to that comparison chart, so I can talk a little bit about that. So just a minute, hold that thought. So for Google Drive, just to kind of finish up the presentation, we have a few other questions that didn't quite fit into other spots in the presentation. So one was, what am I supposed to do when I see request access or that I don't have access? Like, what does that mean? And what does requesting access do? Briefly, I'll say that means somebody shared a link with you, but didn't actually give you rights, like didn't add you to be able to edit or view that document. Or it could just be that you're not logged in to your U of M account. Like I know that's something that can happen if you manage multiple accounts. Maybe you're not in the right one. But when you click request access, that will alert all of the owners, which sometimes is a lot of people. If it's a document coming from, especially if it's a document coming from a shared drive or a folder with a lot of collaborators. So I would actually suggest emailing. I would suggest emailing the person who actually.
If you know
sent
who
it.
they are.
Yeah, well, I just mean if you get an email that says, I've shared this thing with you, my recommendation would be to respond back to that person in the email and say, great, cool, but could you share it with me? I don't seem to have access. Because sometimes when you click request access, it will email like the entire college, depending on where the file is. And you don't know where that file is when you're just seeing that you don't have access to it. Not the whole college, but it might be like a big, like the whole leadership team, or it might be,
Yeah,
it might be a big group of people.
All degree and credit programs or whatever.
Yep.
So, yeah.
The other piece is if you want Google Drive to behave more like a Z Drive, you can do that. They have a tool called Drive for Desktop, and I think they also have that for mobile, that allows you to work within documents on your computer, or as though they're on your computer. And it's especially useful if you're trying to work on documents that are not a Google format. So if you have Word documents, Excel files, other originals, like I was talking about with Adobe and things like that, in a shared drive or in my drive, they open more like a native file in your computer. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using Drive for Desktop if you primarily edit documents within Drive directly on the web, I mean browser, but it is a good option for non-Google formats. And then this gets back to a couple things I've already mentioned, but CCAPS IT nor OIT have more access to files than you do. So my drive, again, it's on you to share them with the right people. And then for shared drive, if you want to add like CCAPS IT GG, that group, to that shared drive, we can kind of do some help there. But again, OIT doesn't have any more special access than you do to recover documents. So I just need to say that multiple times to make sure that I get that out.
say if a person leaves, once they're gone and their access goes away, there's nothing that can be done other than copying if you
Yeah.
still happen to have the ability to do that.
And then finally, we mentioned using Box already, but yeah, if you want to collaborate with those types of organizations that either block Google or don't really support Google in a way, like if you want to make it easier for your collaborators to work on a document, it's real easy to share with Box using Box things like Word documents and other Office documents to be edited within Box, which is actually its most secure. Its recommended way to work with the most secure data is to not have a version on your actual computer. So from within Box, the website, you can actually edit Word documents inside your browser. And that way there's never a copy on your computer to lose track of. So it's kind of the ultimate in secure, which is why it's recommended for some of that private health information.
Yes.
Okay. So the next piece is, what if I need help and support? So that's great. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to get back to the question from.
Yeah, and Susan's actually
Sue.
added some extra context here about imagining it would be challenging to try to use both Z and Google at a regular day-to-day basis, but what are the types of circumstances we should use? Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. So so there are a lot of things in this question, and I think this is actually one of the questions that that has a lot of it depends kind of comments from people like me, at least, and maybe Steve can give some of his tips as well. But to begin with, I see Google Drive, or shared, as an opportunity to collaborate on the fly at the same time on documents that maybe have a lifetime. Like you can kind of say roughly this document will be good until we redo this project, or I actually need to get rid of it by a certain time due to data retention policy given to me by the granting agency or the university, or whatever policy you're working within. So things that are reviewable on a regular basis and have very specific list of collaborators. I think that's kind of the idea that Google Drives or Drive is best at. Also, I will say it's good for people who are very comfortable working within a web browser to work on documents, because that's going to be your primary interface with these things is in a web browser. So if that's just not your speed, great. Then maybe using Z Drive is better, especially if your team shares some of that same preference. The downside, though, of using Z Drive is it's really difficult to do any live document editing or collaboration that's real time, which again, maybe isn't how you work, and that's cool. So using primarily one over the other is best for the reason you say, like, how do I know where to look? So I'll say maybe as a team, if you're going to say, really, we need to just get onto this, get onto Google Drive for this project. Maybe you make a shared drive for everything related. Project is not the same term for everybody, I recognize, but for this batch of work, say, maybe for this batch of work, you have it in shared drive, but for your regular team documents and all the other things that you normally do and share, those live in the Z Drive, say. So you can just try using shared drive for one batch of work rather than moving your whole team to it. Because I will say it does work better when the group kind of decides, let's all use Google Drive or let's all use Z Drive. So I will say it still depends on your preference.
Yes, it's something you really need to discuss in your work group, and discuss, okay, when we're doing this type of thing, we should do it here. When we're doing this type of thing, we should do it over here. Maybe when we're done working on it, we should move it from Google into Z just for storage purposes. And that's really however you're all comfortable working.
You have a follow-up to that, or just that kind of? It's not an easy answer. It's just
Okay,
some
so,
tips.
so we could choose to
Yes.
say, we are never gonna use, like from some date forward, we're never gonna use Z again. We're just gonna use Google Drive, and that's okay.
Yes,
If you wish, yeah.
if you wish to.
Yep. And again, yep, if the team makes that call, that's great. I mean, there may still be some things that live there because, before that decision, which you could,
Yes.
over time work to bring into Google Drive if you
Or
wanted,
get rid of.
or get
Yeah.
get rid of, which is
Yeah.
Be a
even
good
better.
project.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, no, or get rid of, because you may have worked with me in the past with at one point we were doing a review of where does the college store social security numbers, and way back when I did a search across the Z drive. I think it was just the Z drive and some Google folders, because we determined that the college had no need to store social security numbers. Maybe they were part of a purpose for a brief moment, as
Right.
getting someone's documentation set up for working here, but we didn't need to keep a copy. And so we got to do a sweep. It was a really great moment to see how people are organizing things in the Z drive, and make sure that everything we were doing was correct and secure.
Mhm.
So I will say that if you use like if you're not, if your upper limit is student data and you don't go into health or credit card or other special data that need to be kept more secure than student data, say, then you get to choose. You don't have to be limited to one of the options or the other, as long as it's one of the ones supported by
Mhm.
by the university. Oh, I even got a thumbs up. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
All right. So we have a few more minutes for other questions, but I just remembered I have one more slide to share about support. And then we'll get to more questions.
Yes.
So because Google Drive is supported by the university, we kind of have a layered support model. So inside of Google Drive, you may have noticed there are question marks in different places. You can click those to get more details about what that feature does. So when Steve was showing the shared screen, there was a little question mark up there, and that'll tell you more details about what editor means and what viewer means. You can also check this page on the IT service and technology catalog. Google Drive also has a lot of its own documentation that OIT links to. So you can also just Google things about Google Drive, of course. For support, you might be able to figure out yourself. If you're having trouble figuring out what to do, or you really have a bigger picture idea, you can email CCAPS IT. I will again say that's especially for consultations about how I should start this new thing, knowing we want to use Google Drive. Say, we're great to help. We're set up to help with that sort of thing. For regular old support, it's still best to follow the rest of this path, like trying to get kind of the self-guided support. So even asking a colleague is great. Steve wanted to point out that it should be a colleague who maybe knows more than you. But if you ask a colleague who doesn't, and you find out together that neither of you know the answer, then you can both learn. It'll be great.
And it's a good learning experience, and we're happy.
Yeah. And we'll be happy for you when you both learn.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can contact OIT because it is a university supported tool. So you can call, they used to say One Help, but I think since nobody much is on campus anymore, they print out the full number. So 612-301-4357, or email them at help@umn.edu. If they decide that it's a CCAP specific thing, they may involve us. But for a lot of those support things, it's about Google Drive. And then I'll leave y'all with, and again, we'll get to some questions here in the chat, but that with great power comes great responsibility, meaning Google Drive gives you the opportunity to choose who you share things with, and also the information that you put in Google Drive and for how long. And so, manage your collaborators like you would any other thing. Like, know who has access to your documents. It's on all of us to protect the data that we use on a day-to-day basis, and to help protect the university as well. So, it's important to manage your collaborators, but also the files themselves. Make sure that you kind of roughly know what's in documents, and that's why it's better not to let them age too much,
Mhm.
because you might lose track of what all you're keeping.
And
So,
it's easy to do that.
yeah, it's easy to never delete files in Google
Yes.
Drive or Gmail or anything that Google does, because they want that data. They want to
Yes, yeah.
scrape things, I'm sure. Although I know they're not supposed to with Google Drive for education stuff, but um, I will say it's best
Trust but
and more
verify.
sustainable. Yeah. The safest and most sustainable method is really to keep an eye on things. And this isn't unique to Google Drive.
Yeah.
This is it's more sustainable to know that you've got a review process in place, even if it's only annually, and it's only, just, is this still needed? And
Right.
a yes or a no is great. But as long as you're having that conversation, I think that's a good place to start. Okay, so just a couple minutes left. Yeah.
We got one other question. Actually,
Yeah.
they're requesting a demo of how to change ownership on Google Drive. I think I can do that real quick here. If you
Oh
want.
yeah, that's great. Here, let me stop sharing. Right. Okay.
Okay, let's see.
Good question, Annika.
Good one. Okay. Let's go back to our folder here. And so let's do share. And right now we'll say we'll make Annika.
Since you asked.
Hey, Annika. Believe we can do an owner. Let's see, commenter, editor.
So click send to add her as an editor first, and then I think you can upgrade her from that point to go back to share. I think that's how this one works.
That one, that one. Transfer ownership. Here we go. Make this person the owner. Yes or no? And you can answer yes at that point. So let's show that again. First you add them, and then you just click on the editor drop down, or the permissions drop down, and you can do one of the options now is transfer ownership. And then they give you one last warning: you're going to transfer the ownership, and that's not reversible, at least on your part. So
yeah, as soon as you make someone else the owner, they can choose to remove you, because they have that ability, and that's part of the idea. You're giving them the responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, good question, Annika.
Okay. Linda, did that answer your question?
Oh, great. You were talking about
Yes,
transfer.
because you were the one who I think originally started off with that. Was that good? Okay.
So much. Thank you.
Okay, good.
All right. So if you have any additional questions, I think what I'd like to do, I haven't built this yet, but I think I'm going to send out a survey for future topics and feedback. So you can ask additional questions there. If not,
we are at time, so we can probably.
Yeah, I want to say that we're
But
at
if you
time.
want to stay on for a few minutes, we could, Dan or I can answer questions for you. But
But otherwise, thank you for coming to this sort of reboot of the Tech Talks, so that we could help share some information.
Tell them about coming attractions.
Oh yes, the coming attraction. This is we're already losing people, but we do have one more in the books. Well, I'm not sharing, but our next presentation will be about Google spreadsheets and using them in a bit more detail to do filtering, sorting, calculations, and even connecting pivot tables. So using them a little bit more like in a bit more advanced fashion.
Yes.
And we'll announce that date in the near future.
Yes.